Imagine waking up every morning with the weight of the world on your shoulders. Your breathing is rapid, your thoughts are racing, and you have the constant feeling that something is about to fall apart. For millions of people who struggle with chronic stress and anxiety, this is not a fictional description, but the daily reality of their lives. However, almost 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers had already developed a complete system for dealing with life's adversities and finding serenity even in turbulent times. The Stoics not only theorized about how to live well, but they created concrete practices that we can apply today in our search for mental balance. One of these practices, perhaps the most powerful for our modern age, is journaling. The seemingly simple act of recording thoughts, emotions, and reflections on paper. What few people know is that this practice has deep roots in the Stoic tradition and can be a transformative tool for those struggling with stress. On this journey together, we will explore how the simple habit of writing regularly, when structured with Stoic principles, can help us identify harmful thought patterns, gain mental clarity, process difficult emotions, and gradually transform our relationship with life circumstances. If you've been struggling to find peace amidst the chaos, if worries seem to multiply faster than you can process them, or if you're simply looking for a concrete practice to anchor your mental health, this is your invitation to discover how ancient Stoic wisdom, combined with the practice of journaling, can offer not just temporary relief, but lasting transformation in the way you approach life's challenges. Let's discover together this powerful tool that combines the depth of philosophy with the simplicity of daily practice, paving the way for a life with less stress and more serenity. 1. Historical origins of journaling in Stoic philosophy. In the early hours of the morning, a Roman emperor would sit alone, writing in his personal diary. It was not military orders or imperial decrees that flowed from his pen, but intimate reflections on his own nature, reminders on how to live virtuously, and meditations on the brevity of life. This man, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful rulers in history, found time for the practice of what we now call journaling. "Do not be distracted," he wrote to himself. "In every impulse, give attention to what is going on in your mind. Keep straight or be straightened." What few realize is that the document we know today as the Meditations was not written for publication, but was essentially a personal diary, a record of reflections intended for the emperor's own eyes only. In reading his words, we are witnessing perhaps the most famous example of Stoic journaling in history. Marcus Aurelius was not alone in this practice. Seneca, the Roman statesman and philosopher, developed an elaborate system of self-examination through writing. His letters to Lucilius demonstrate how he used correspondence not only to instruct, but as a way to clarify his own thinking and reflect on his spiritual and philosophical progress. "I make an examination of myself every day," Seneca wrote. "When the light goes out and my wife is finally silent, I analyze my whole day and review my actions and words." This practice of daily review through writing became a cornerstone of Stoic personal development. Meanwhile, Epictetus, a former slave turned influential philosophy teacher, instructed his students to keep notebooks where they wrote down Stoic principles and recorded their practical application in daily life. In the ancient philosophical tradition, these notebooks were known as hypomnemata, external repositories of thought and reflection that served as exercises for developing the soul. They were not diaries in the modern sense, focused on events or feelings, but deliberate tools for personal transformation. What makes these ancient practices so relevant to us today is that they were not merely intellectual. The Stoics wrote not just to document ideas, but to actively process their emotional experiences and train their minds to respond more wisely to life's challenges. Writing was, for them, a technology of personal transformation. Imagine Marcus Aurelius, who ruled much of the known world, taking time each morning to organize his thoughts, wrestle with his insecurities and fears, and reaffirm his values through writing. If this man, with all his responsibilities, found value in this practice, how much more can we, with our own modern struggles? What the Stoics discovered, and what modern science confirms, is that putting thoughts on paper allows for a kind of clarity that we rarely achieve when we keep our thoughts in our minds. It's as if by taking our thoughts out and putting them outside of ourselves, we gain the ability to observe them objectively, to examine them from different angles, and to work with them in ways that are impossible when they remain in our heads. This ancient practice of written reflection offers a bridge between worlds separated by millennia, a simple technique that connects our stressful modern lives with the time-tested wisdom of philosophers who, despite living in radically different circumstances, face the same fundamental human struggles that we do today. 2. The Stoic distinction between what we can and cannot control applied to journaling. Some things are within our control, while others are not. Within our control are our opinions, impulses, desires, and aversions. In short, everything that is our own doing. Not within our control are our body, our property, our reputation, our position. In short, everything that is not our own doing. These words, written by Epictetus nearly 2 millennia ago in his handbook, represent perhaps the most fundamental and liberating principle of Stoic philosophy. It's a simple distinction in theory, but revolutionary in practice, especially for those struggling with chronic stress and anxiety. When we look closely at our worries, we realize an uncomfortable truth. Much of our mental anguish arises from failed attempts to control the uncontrollable. We wear ourselves out emotionally trying to change the weather, the opinions of others, past events, or future circumstances that are beyond our direct influence. This is where journaling becomes an incomparable tool. The act of writing allows us to realize the Stoic distinction, transforming an abstract philosophical principle into a tangible practice for stress relief. Imagine opening your notebook and drawing a line down the middle of the page, creating 2 columns. In the left column, you write "in my control," and in the right column, "out of my control." Now consider a specific stressful situation in your life. Perhaps an upcoming presentation at work, a family conflict, or financial concern. Start listing all aspects of the situation, putting each element in the appropriate column. For example, for a presentation at work, you might note that your preparation time, the quality of your slides, and your mental attitude are all within your control. However, the audience's reaction, unexpected technical issues, or whether your boss will be in a good mood that day, these clearly belong in the "out of my control" column. What happens during this exercise is profoundly therapeutic. First, you gain clarity. The simple act of categorizing your stressors brings a sense of order to the chaos. Second, you recognize where your energy should be directed, to the things that are genuinely within your power. And third, and perhaps most importantly, you begin the process of accepting what you cannot change. A participant in a Stoic journaling workshop once shared, "After doing this exercise for a few weeks, I realized that I was spending 80% of my energy worrying about things in the out of my control column. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders when I started redirecting that energy." This technique can be applied to virtually any stressful situation in our daily lives. A worrying medical diagnosis? You don't control the diagnosis itself, but you do control how you seek treatment, how you educate yourself about the condition, and how you maintain healthy habits. A difficult relationship? You don't control the other person's behavior, but you do control your own communication boundaries and emotional responses. The power of this practice lies in its simplicity. It doesn't require special equipment, years of training, or a specific environment. All you need is a notebook, a pen, and a few minutes of honest reflection. Yet its effects can be profound and long-lasting. Over time, this exercise doesn't just remain on paper. It becomes part of your thinking. You start to automatically make this distinction when faced with a stressful situation, which leads to a more balanced and less anxious response. 3. How to identify and name emotions through writing, a Stoic approach. It is not the things themselves that trouble us, but the opinions we have about them. This insightful observation by Epictetus reveals a deep understanding of human experience that anticipates the discoveries of modern cognitive psychology by almost 2,000 years. For the Stoics, emotions were not mysterious forces that simply happened to us. Instead, they were seen as a result of judgments and interpretations we make about events. This perspective offers extraordinary power. If our emotions arise from our interpretations, then we can transform them by changing the way we think. The first step in this process is accurate identification, naming what we're feeling. It sounds simple, but most of us have never been taught how to do this accurately. We often operate with limited emotional vocabulary, reducing the rich complexity of our inner experience to vague terms like good, bad, stressed, or upset. Here, journaling becomes a powerful tool. The blank page invites us to be more precise. Instead of saying we're stressed, We can probe deeper. Are we anxious about the future? Frustrated by obstacles? Overwhelmed by the amount of work? Each of these more specific emotions suggests different causes and requires different responses. A modern Stoic technique for journaling is what we might call emotional labeling. Start by simply noticing and recording your emotions throughout the day. Right now, I feel irritated. This morning, I felt anticipation. During the meeting, I felt discomfort and then relief. The simple act of naming your emotions accurately, studies have shown, can lessen their intensity. It's as if by naming the experience, you begin to gain some distance from it. You're no longer completely consumed by the emotion, but now have perspective on it. A crucial aspect of this practice is the detachment of the emotion from its supposed external trigger. Instead of writing, "That person made me angry," the Stoic approach encourages us to write, "I felt anger rise up in me when I interpreted that person's actions as disrespectful." This small shift in language acknowledges that the emotion was not caused directly by the external event, but by our interpretation of it. This opens a door to questioning that interpretation, the first step toward transforming our emotional experience. Another powerful Stoic journaling exercise is body mapping emotions. Here, you not only name the emotion, but also describe in detail how it manifests in your body. Anxiety, tightness in the chest, shallow breathing, tension in the shoulders, cold feeling in the hands. Frustration, clenched jaw, heat in the face, restless energy in the arms. This body mapping serves multiple purposes. First, it helps us identify emotions early, before they escalate. Second, it brings our attention to the present, anchoring us in immediate bodily experience rather than getting lost in thought spirals. And third, it reminds us that emotions have a temporary physical component. They arise, persist for a while, and then dissipate like waves. A particularly valuable aspect of the Stoic approach is the distinction between the initial impression and the subsequent judgment. When something happens, we have an immediate, almost automatic reaction, the impression. The Stoics teach us that we have the power to pause in that moment before adding our judgment to the impression. In journaling, we can practice this pause by writing, "I received the impression that my colleague was belittling me." This generated an initial surge of anger. I am suspending my judgment about whether this impression is true. With regular practice, this type of reflective writing develops what modern psychologists call metacognition, the ability to observe our own mental processes. This skill is crucial for managing stress and anxiety because it allows us to intervene at the very point where psychological distress often begins, in the automatic judgments we make about events. For journaling techniques to examine automatic judgments according to the Stoic view. In the Stoic view, much of our emotional suffering comes not from the situations themselves, but from the automatic judgments we make about them. These judgments often occur so quickly that we are barely aware of them. They are mental reflexes conditioned by years of habit. Yet it is precisely these judgments that are the root of stress and anxiety. Imagine sending an important message to a coworker and not receiving a response for hours. Without realizing it, your mind may generate thoughts like, "He's deliberately ignoring me. My message wasn't important enough," or "I must have said something wrong." These automatic judgments, not the silence itself, are what trigger feelings of rejection, anxiety, or frustration. Journaling provides a space to bring these judgments into the light of consciousness, where they can be examined objectively. One particularly powerful technique is the 3-column method, inspired by both Stoic philosophy and modern cognitive behavioral therapy. To practice this method, divide a page into 3 columns. In the first column, situation, describe objectively what happened, just the facts, without interpretation. I sent a message at 10 a.m. It's 2 p.m. and I still haven't received a response. In the second column, automatic judgments, record the thoughts and interpretations that arise spontaneously. He is ignoring me. My message was not important. Maybe I offended him in some way. In the third column, most reasonable judgment, question the initial judgment and develop more balanced alternative interpretations. There are many reasons why someone doesn't respond immediately. They may be busy in meetings or away from their phone. I have no evidence that I am being deliberately ignored. This technique perfectly embodies the Stoic principle of distinguishing between facts and opinions. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Take away the opinion, and you have taken away the complaint. Take away the complaint, and you have taken away the injury." By separating the factual situation from our interpretation of it, we begin to realize how many of our negative emotional reactions are based not on reality, but on automatic judgments that are often distortions. Another valuable technique is to identify specific cognitive distortions in our journaling. These are predictable and systematically biased ways of thinking that modern psychologists have cataloged, but that the Stoics recognized millennia ago. Some common distortions include catastrophizing. If I fail this presentation, my career is over. Mind reading. She thinks I'm incompetent. Overgeneralization. I always end up messing things up. All or nothing thinking. If it's not perfect, it's a complete failure. In your journal, you can learn to identify these distortions and then reframe them using Stoic principles. For example, catastrophizing can be countered with the Stoic principle of calmly visualizing the worst-case scenario and realizing that even in that case, you can cope and adapt. A participant in a Stoic journaling group shared, "After a few weeks of identifying my distortions on paper, I began to catch myself in the act of catastrophizing throughout the day. It was as if my mind now had an alarm that went off when I began to distort reality." It's important to note that the goal is not to replace all negative thoughts with positive ones. That would be a form of self-deception that Stoics would reject. Instead, the goal is to align our judgments more closely with reality, removing the distortions that unnecessarily amplify our suffering. To make this practice more effective, consider taking a few minutes at the end of your day to journal about stressful situations and apply the 3-column method. Over time, you'll not only learn to recognize your automatic judgment patterns, but you'll also develop a habit of challenging them when they arise. This practice of examining judgments acts as an antidote to rumination, that endless cycle of negative thoughts that often fuels anxiety and depression. Instead of getting stuck in worry spirals, you develop the ability to actively intervene in the thought-forming process. 5. The practice of premeditation of adversities, premeditatio malorum, through journaling. It is precisely in times of security that the mind should prepare for difficulties. In prosperity, prepare for adversity. This wisdom from Seneca captures the essence of one of Stoicism's most distinctive and powerful practices, premeditatio malorum, or premeditation of adversity. Counterintuitively, the Stoics believed that deliberately contemplating possible future hardships was not an exercise in pessimism, but rather a way to develop emotional resilience. At first glance, this might seem contrary to modern advice to think positively. However, the goal is not to defeat anxiety, but rather to remove its power through mental preparation. Journaling provides an ideal space for this practice. Unlike unproductive worry, which is typically vague, repetitive, and focused on fears, written premeditation is structured, specific, and solution-oriented. It transforms nebulous anxiety into concrete preparation. Imagine you have an important job interview coming up. Instead of trying to suppress anxious thoughts about what could go wrong, a strategy that often fails, you could dedicate a page in your journal to deliberately contemplating possible challenges. In my next interview, I may encounter questions I'm not prepared for. The interviewer may be hostile or uninterested. I may stutter or forget important points. I may be faced with more qualified competitors. I may simply not be the right person for this particular position. But practice doesn't stop at identifying potential adversities. The next crucial step is to visualize yourself facing these challenges with virtue and resilience. If I'm faced with an unexpected question, I can pause, take a breath, and answer honestly, even if it means admitting I don't know something. If the interviewer seems hostile, I can maintain my composure and respond calmly and clearly, remembering that their behavior is beyond my control. If I don't get this position, I can accept the outcome with grace and use the experience to better prepare myself for the next opportunity. This exercise is radically different from ordinary worrying. While worrying usually involves circular thoughts that increase anxiety without generating solutions, Stoic premeditation is a limited and focused process that culminates in a greater sense of preparedness and calm. One particularly valuable aspect of this technique is that it reduces the surprise factor of adversity. As Seneca observed, what comes upon the mind by surprise is more oppressive. Novelty increases the weight of calamities. By visualizing potential setbacks in advance, you remove the element of surprise that often amplifies stress when difficulties actually arise. A practical way to incorporate this technique into your daily journaling is to take a few minutes each morning to identify potential challenges for the day and visualize virtuous responses. For example, today I have a meeting with a difficult client. He may reject our proposal or make unreasonable demands. If this happens, I will remain calm, listen carefully to his concerns, and respond professionally regardless of how he behaves. A participant in a Stoic journaling workshop reported, "After practicing premeditation for a few weeks, I noticed that situations that had previously made me panic now felt familiar. It was as if I had already visited that difficult territory in my mind. So when it actually happened, I knew the way." It's important to note that this practice is not meant to generate fear or pessimism. Rather, its purpose is to create a sense of confidence and preparedness. After contemplating what could go wrong and how you would respond, many people experience profound sense of relief. Even if the worst happens, I can handle it. This technique has applications beyond specific situations. You can also use it for more general adversities in life. The Stoics regularly contemplated illness, financial loss, and even death, not to torture themselves, but to lessen the power that fear of these possibilities had over them. By implementing this practice into your regular journaling, you gradually develop what the Stoics valued above all else: the ability to maintain inner stability regardless of external circumstances. And it is precisely this ability to respond to challenges with wisdom rather than reacting with panic that is at the heart of the next section, developing the Stoic virtue of prudence through reflective journaling. 6. Reflective journaling as a way to develop the Stoic virtue of prudence. For the Stoics, prudence, phronesis, was one of the 4 cardinal virtues, along with courage, justice, and temperance. Prudence can be understood as a practical wisdom that allows us to make correct decisions in complex situations aligned with our deepest values. Reflective journaling offers a privileged space to develop this essential virtue, as it allows us to examine our decisions, values, and thought patterns calmly and clearly. Unlike decisions made in the heat of the moment, when we write, we have the opportunity to consider different perspectives and evaluate the consequences of our choices. A powerful practice is to set aside time each week to review important decisions you've made. Ask yourself, was this decision aligned with my Stoic values? Did I adequately consider the common good? Did I use reason rather than impulse? You can structure your journaling to clarify your values using questions like, what does living virtuously mean to me today? What characteristics of the Stoic sage do I most value and wish to cultivate? What Stoic principles are most relevant to the challenges I am currently facing? By recording your answers to these questions and reviewing them regularly, you'll be building a personal prudence manual that you can refer to in times of doubt or stress. One particularly effective technique is advice to a friend. When you're facing a difficult decision, write as if you were giving advice to a dear friend who is facing the same situation. This detachment often allows us to access our inner wisdom with greater clarity and less emotional interference. The connection between prudence and stress reduction is straightforward. When we develop confidence in our ability to make wise decisions, we reduce anxiety about future choices. Stress often comes from uncertainty and a lack of confidence in our judgment. By systematically strengthening our prudence through journaling, we are, in effect, building a protective barrier against decision-related stress. 7. Practical writing exercises for emotional distancing in stressful situations. One of Stoicism's most powerful techniques for dealing with stress is what we call emotional distancing, the ability to create space between ourselves and our intense emotional reactions. Journaling offers several practical tools for developing this skill. The first technique I want to share is the famous view from above, inspired by Marcus Aurelius. In your journal, when you're dealing with a stressful situation, start by imagining that you're rising above the situation, seeing it from progressively higher elevation. First from the ceiling, then above the city, then from space. Describe how the situation looks from each perspective, noting how it diminishes in importance as you move further away. Another powerful technique is to write in the third person. Instead of saying, I am angry because my boss criticized my work, right? Marcus is angry because his boss criticized his work. This simple shift in perspective creates a cognitive space that allows you to analyze the situation more objectively. An especially enriching practice is written dialogue with an imaginary Stoic sage. For example, me, Seneca, I'm extremely anxious about my presentation tomorrow. What if I fail? Seneca, imaginary, what exactly are you afraid of? The disapproval of others? Me, yes, mainly that. Seneca, and is it within your control what others think? Me, no, it really isn't. Seneca, so what would be the virtuous approach to the situation? The temporal zoom-out exercise is also extremely effective. Ask yourself and record, what will this situation that is causing me so much stress today look like in a week, a month, a year, 10 years? This exercise helps us realize the transitory nature of most of the problems we face. These practices are not meant to suppress legitimate emotions, but rather to reduce over-identification with thoughts that intensify stress. By creating the space of observation, we can respond to situations wisely rather than reacting automatically, which is essential for long-term stress relief. 8. How to structure a Stoic diary. Daily questions, reflections, and self-assessment. Establishing a clear structure for your Stoic journal is key to making it an effective stress-relieving tool. Let's explore a practical format that's directly inspired by the practices of the ancient Stoics. To start the day, taking inspiration from Marcus Aurelius, we can include morning questions such as, what potentially challenging situations might I face today? What virtues will I need to exercise to face these challenges? How can I remember what is and isn't in my control? This morning exercise mentally prepares us for challenges of the day, reducing reactive stress when difficult situations actually occur. Towards the end of the day, following Seneca's practice of daily review, we can include questions such as, how did I exercise the Stoic virtues today? When have I allowed incorrect judgments to cause me unnecessary stress? What did I learn today that I can apply tomorrow? This nightly reflection closes a learning cycle, allowing constant growth and progressive reduction of stress. To make your journal more structured, consider dividing each entry into specific sections. Preparation morning, visualization of challenges and mental preparation. Event log throughout the day, situations that provoked emotional reactions. Analysis night, examining the judgment behind reactions. Remedies night, Stoic reformulations for stressful situations. Gratitude evening, acknowledging positive aspects of the day. Establishing a consistent routine is crucial. Even 5 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes at night can transform your relationship with stress. If time is limited, consider abbreviated versions of practice, focusing only on the most essential questions. When it comes to format, both physical journals and digital apps have their merits. A traditional notebook offers fewer distractions and a more tangible connection to your practice, while apps like Stoic, Daily Stoic Journal, or even notes on your phone offer convenience and additional features like reminders. The most important thing is not the tool, but the consistency. As Epictetus would say, do not expect things to happen as you wish. Decide to want them to happen as they do, and you will prosper. 9. Journaling as a tool to identify and challenge non-Stoic thoughts that cause stress. One of the fundamental causes of stress, according to Stoic philosophy, is incorrect thoughts and judgments about reality. Journaling offers a systematic method for identifying and challenging these non-Stoic thought patterns that create unnecessary suffering. First, we need to learn to recognize the typical thought patterns that the Stoics would consider irrational. These include catastrophizing. This presentation will be a complete disaster that will ruin my career. Personalization. He didn't reply to my email because he doesn't value me. Dichotomous thinking. Either I am perfectly successful in this project or I am a complete failure. Rigid demands. People must treat me with respect at all times. In your journal, create a section to record stressful thoughts, identifying which of these patterns they belong to. This simple act of categorization already creates a healthy distance. Then apply Socratic questioning through writing, asking questions like, what evidence do I have that this thought is true? Is this thought completely under my control? How would a Stoic sage view the situation? Does this thought help me exercise any virtue? One particularly powerful technique is to distinguish between preferences and demands. The Stoics understood that it is natural to have preferences, but turning them into rigid demands causes suffering. For example, demand, "My boss must approve my idea or it is unacceptable." Rephrase as preference, "I would prefer my boss to approve my idea, but if he or she doesn't, I can accept it and move on." The exercise, "The Worst That Can Happen," inspired by the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, consists of: write down what the worst-case scenario is. Assess the real probability of the scenario. Plan how you respond virtuously even in this worst-case scenario. Reflect on the internal resources you have to deal with any situation. This practice dramatically reduces emotional reactivity because it removes the element of surprise and reminds us of our inner capacity to respond virtuously to any circumstances. By regularly practicing identifying and reframing non-Stoic thoughts in your journal, you will literally be retraining your mind to respond to situations in ways that are more aligned with Stoic philosophy and, consequently, experiencing much less stress. 10. Integrating journaling with other Stoic practices to create a complete stress management routine. Journaling, while powerful on its own, reaches its full potential when integrated with other Stoic practices. Let's explore how to create a complete stress management routine by combining Stoic journaling with other philosophical tools. A particularly effective combination is journaling and Stoic meditation. Begin your writing session with 3 to 5 minutes of silent contemplation on a Stoic principle, such as the dichotomy of control. This mental preparation creates the ideal frame of mind for productive, reflective journaling. Then, use your journal to record insights that emerge during your meditation. The Stoic practice of virtue visualization also lends itself well to journaling. Dedicate a page of your journal to describing in detail what it would be like to live according to each cardinal virtue: prudence, justice, courage, and temperance, in light of the specific challenges you face. Revisiting these descriptions regularly strengthens your commitment to the Stoic path. Self-control exercises, so highly valued by the Stoics, are powerful when accompanied by journaling. For example, if you practice voluntary abstinence, such as skipping a meal or avoiding social media for a day, use your journal to record the reactions that arise and insights into your attachments and dependencies. For moments of acute crisis, have a few journal pages ready with Stoic anchors, quotes, principles, and personal reflections that you can quickly reference as philosophical first aid. Remember that consistency is more important than perfection. As Musonius Rufus, Epictetus' teacher, would say, "A theory that is not followed by practice is better than no theory at all, but much inferior to a theory followed by practice." By integrating journaling with other Stoic practices into a consistent routine, you will be building not just a tool for stress relief, but a complete path to a more serene, virtuous, and ultimately happier life. We've reached the end of our journey exploring how Stoic journaling can be a transformative tool for stress relief. We've seen that this practice is not just a writing exercise, but a profound method of mental training rooted in an ancient philosophy, from Marcus Aurelius's meditation to modern self-awareness techniques. Stoic journaling offers us a practical path to developing emotional resilience, mental clarity, and practical wisdom in the face of life's challenges. Remember, the value of this practice lies in consistency. Even a few minutes a day can, over time, profoundly transform your relationship with stress. Start today with a simple structure and allow the practice to evolve naturally. Thank you for watching this far. If this content was helpful, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more videos on Stoic practices for mental well-being. See you in the next video.